Imagine it. You've just left a life of slavery in Egypt to follow your leader, the prophet Moses, into the promised land. You've witnessed miracle after miracle, from horrible plagues to jaw-dropping wonders. You've seen a sea split in two. You've seen a mountain surrounded by fire and lightning. All this so that you could be free. So you could tell the story of how the God of your ancestors redeemed you from slavery with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, to go live in the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to establish a new nation there, a free nation. The HUC-Mishpatim, God says to Moses, these are the rules that you shall set before them. A free society must have rules, laws, and this chapter comes right on the heels of what is perhaps the most famous law-giving scene in all sacred literature, the high drama of Exodus 20, the giving of the Ten Commandments. As Rashi explains it, these rules, just like those rules, were given as part of a single event at Sinai. These are merely elaborations, details of the new social order prescribed for the Israelites. And what is the first rule given here about that social order? When you acquire a Hebrew slave, not an auspicious beginning. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th year he shall go free without payment. Temporary slavery, which may sound better than building monuments in Egypt, but we can't help wondering why God would have gone to such trouble to free the Israelites, only to give Moses rules which permit slavery. It had seemed that God had a problem with the institution itself. Now it appears that things aren't quite so simple. The text goes on to describe a ceremony for taking a temporary slave and making him a permanent one. If the slave declares, I love my master and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free, his master shall take him before God. He shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall then remain his slave for life. Lest we think that the only way a person might remain unfree is by choice, let's consider that wife and those children, the property of the master. And we read, when a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not be freed, as male slaves are. Going on, we see that this daughter isn't really expected to gain her freedom at all, but rather wifedom, a different kind of servitude. In the ancient world, paradoxically, being unfree as a wife was a relatively desirable status, given the options available. In Kiddushin 22b, remarking on the ceremony of the Hebrew slave who chooses to remain enslaved, our sages highlight 2 details for comment. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai tells us that the ear is pierced, because it is the ear which heard God say, it is to me that the Israelites are servants. He teaches, they are my servants, and not servants of servants, and yet this man went and acquired a master for himself. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, highlights the door and doorpost. These were witnesses at the first Passover, when God spared the houses of the Israelites. That was the moment, he says, when we became God's servants. And he too teaches to be servants and not servants of servants. In the ancient world, freedom was relative. Free women remained subject to the wills of their fathers, husbands, brothers, even sons. Free men to kings and patriarchs. And everyone was subject to religious, economic, and legal pressures which we can only imagine. Our tradition may have some blind spots on some of these matters. Different ages call for different expectations, of course. But the ideal our tradition suggests to us today is a compelling one. We should regard ourselves as subject, not to the passing ups and downs of fortune, but to that eternal source of all life, who said, I will be what I will be. This is the one who demands of us justice, compassion, and a willingness to grow, whether we find ourselves toiling in Egypt, content in a promised land, or somewhere in between.